Hello and welcome to Podcast Vancouver. I am Scott Weber, and today we're going to have a little presentation on gear setup, how to set up your podcasting studio. I am joined today by Nathan Strong, aka Tech Guy Nate, and he's going to walk us through some setups. So without further ado, please welcome Nathan Strong.
Mr. Scott Weber, thanks for having me on today for talking about podcasting setups.
Great. Well, I'm sure you can share with us a lot of valuable information for my listeners.
Yes, I love talking about this stuff. I'm going to be focusing mostly on the hardware setups in this little presentation. I just like the hardware stuff more. You know what I mean? To me, that's more fun. But there definitely is a software component, and maybe you'll talk about that, a little deeper on some of the other modules or podcasts. Real quick before we get started, just so everyone knows, we're recording this in like a video webinar format right now. Scott, I believe you said you're releasing this in audio as well as a podcast. So if people are listening to just the audio right now, where can they go find the video?
They can go to podcastvancouver.com/4. That'd be session 4.
Nice.
Your setup. So it'll be in the show notes. We'll have the presentation along with the audio. And it's also available on iTunes and SoundCloud and Stitcher Radio.
10-4. So yeah, basically, in case you're hearing this and we refer to a picture that's on a slide or something like that, and you're wondering, what are they talking about? That's basically what it is. It's kind of, we're recording a little short webinar on hardware podcasting setup. So let's go ahead and get started here. There's a lot of different ways you can go about podcasting. And I think a lot of people do have a little bit of a fear of all the audio equipment that's required and how do I even get started. And so basically what I want to talk about in this little presentation is a couple different setups, like a studio setup at home and then a mobile setup on the go. And at the core of it is you have to determine first and foremost, what kind of podcast do you want to produce? There are a ton of different formats for podcasting. Maybe you want to do a solo podcast where you're just you're giving your message to your audience. Maybe you want to get a co-host on and just talk about tech or your favorite hobby. Maybe you want to line up guests for interviews, or maybe you want to co-host with a guest. I mean, it goes endless. I mean, you can even do car interviews like that Jerry Seinfeld show, the comedians in cars getting coffee, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's really, the possibilities are endless. So I think first and foremost, you need to decide what kind of podcast you want to do, and then we can kind of match, the hardware required to accomplish that. And I think it's going to be a lot less hardware than you might think.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I want to get through here at Podcast Vancouver. This is for all kinds of business people, whether you're in real estate, you have a local restaurant, farmer's market, what have you. It's just a great way of driving traffic back to your brand or to your website. And it's not as overwhelming as it first appears. It can be done very simply, and it can also be as elaborate as you want it to be. So please continue.
Yeah, so real quick, I just want to cover a couple basics. I mean, when we talk about a podcast, really all we're talking about is recording audio. I mean, you have the aspect of, from a hardware perspective, that's really all it is. In terms of podcasting as a whole, there's a couple more steps after you record, obviously. Maybe you have some post-production, maybe you don't. But ultimately, you have to upload this audio file to a media hosting company such as Libsyn. Libsyn takes that, makes an RSS feed, and puts it in iTunes. That's how it gets in iTunes and how most people search and find podcasts. Like I said, we're covering just the hardware today. So really all you need in terms of recording audio is pretty much two things: a device to record the audio and a microphone. I mean, it sounds a little like, duh, Nathan, what are you talking about? Of course, that's all you need. But that a lot of people, like I said, it gets a little overcomplicated. A device for recording audio, that could be an audio recorder such as the Roll-In, Ederols, the Zooms. You know what I mean? Your smartphone can record audio. iPad, laptop, PC, Mac. All those can be the devices in terms of hardware that actually do the recording.
Pretty much every person out there now has something that can capture audio
Exactly.
in a digital method, and there's no excuses anymore. We all have that capability.
Yeah, and then the other thing is the microphone, and that's the tool that turns the vibrations of your voice into a signal, into an electric signal, basically, that ends up being a digital imprint on the recorder, right? So you want your microphone to be, in my opinion, that's the one thing you don't want to skimp on, is you want a decent quality microphone. That's like the key to this podcasting thing. I mean, if I started listening to a podcast, especially today, that just didn't come with a nice sounding microphone, or you can tell that it's just kind of haphazardly put together. I mean, that's, for me, that's like one of the few instant turnoffs.
Yeah. Well, people are used to listening to traditional radio with great sound qualities, and I mean, they have a lot of it's usually produced in a studio environment with a lot of great microphones and other software and hardware. But the playing field's been leveled. It's quite easy now to have that kind of quality in something you can produce in your home.
Yeah, it is. It's quite amazing. I mean, this microphone, I think, that both you and I are using, which is the Audio Technica ATR 2100. It goes for about $60 on Amazon. It's really not that expensive, and it's a USB and XLR microphone that gives you an option to connect directly to a computer or go XLR into a mixer if you started bumping up the complexity. So let's go ahead and start talking about a studio setup. And when I say studio, I basically mean the studio in your house, right? The one you're going to use, the closet that most podcasters start in, right?
Sure.
Which isn't a bad place to actually start, because considering all the clothes around you, it actually dampens the audio quite well. So,
And we know a successful podcaster that does that quite often.
no, yeah. So that's one method. But talking about the setup, so if you have, right now I'm using a Mac Mini, but if you have a PC, most people have a computer at home, a laptop. If you have a computer, you could simply plug in a microphone like the ATR 2100 via USB into that computer. I mean, and that's really all you need. I mean, that in terms of just a simple setup, you can plug that in and just start recording, like if you're doing a solo show. But once again, it goes back to what kind of podcast you want to do. So if you want to have a guest on or a co-host, something like that, that's where you're going to introduce Skype or some other chatting software, that comes into the mix. Now you have to find a way to capture that audio. And if you're doing an all software method for Skype, something like Call Recorder or Pamela, I think, can do the trick. Have you ever used any of those like call recording software, Scott?
Pamela, I've played around with a little bit on a PC. It's a good option for PC. Very inexpensive. I believe it's a paid subscription, and it works.
Okay.
It works just fine. But I use hardware like you do.
Yeah. And so, everything has pros and cons. So obviously, one of the things that you are limited to with some simple setups like this is, controlling your guest audio. That could be one, issue you might run into. It's going to be hard. It's just going to capture whatever audio they're sending you. That's it's going to end up capturing. So that could be one hurdle, or, there could be various different things that come up. And once you record, I'm not sure if it's going to record in a separate track. I guess it depends, but does it record in the one track, both of your audios, Scott?
It
Or
depends on your sound card.
gotcha.
In your computer. But I mean, most people are using a newer computer. As of 2000, we're recording this in 2015. I would say if your computer's 1 or 2 years old, you're going to have the proper sound card in there so you can separate your tracks.
Gotcha. So it's just one of those things that it's gonna if your audios are a little messed up, though, you'll have to fix them in post production, which ultimately means more work and whatnot. And it gets a lot more tricky if, let's say, you wanted to have one of your co-hosts in studio and then an extra co-host out of studio. Hooking up multiple mics to the computer gets a little finicky. It starts getting more complex, and that's where you introduce like a more complex setup. Going into the next slide here, I'm showing basically the use of some sort of mixer, an audio mixer. And to most people, that I've ever shown my mixer, just, you know what I mean? It can be an intimidating sight because there's a lot of knobs and dials and sliders and inputs and all that kind of stuff. For me, I get excited with all that stuff, but I'm a hardware nerd, so that's just me. But I know most people get intimidated with it. First off, we have to remember these mixers, they're meant to they're used for, or they were created for more musicians and bands, right?
Right, that's
they're
right.
they're meant for, you have a drummer that probably has, I don't know, 6 7 mics on his drums, and you have the audio coming in from guitars and the vocals, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're meant to have all these special effects and echoes and processes to make you sound cool when you're on stage, and those kind of things are in studio.
Well, I'd
So
like to say, Nathan, a lot, it may be intimidating to look at all those knobs, and I was in the music business, so you're tweaking those as a sound person on the go all the time because you're dealing with a room environment with a lot of different things going on, a lot of different instruments. But in podcasting, a lot of these knobs you set them and you forget it. You
yeah.
never touch them again. So you're only actually using a couple of different settings on the mixer in most cases.
Exactly. And that's where I want to get at with these mixers is you really don't need to be too intimidated. I mean, hopefully at some point they're going to actually start coming out with mixers that are meant for podcasters, because I think those would look a lot less intimidating, because really all you need as a podcaster, maybe some control over the gain, some simple, voice stuff, maybe a de-esser, there's some processes that you could do like that. But if you can adjust the gain and have a couple aux in channels and stuff like that, it really can be not as overwhelming, I guess you'd say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, a mixer. So basically, what does a mixer do? You can have multiple inputs. So maybe your microphone, you can have a Skype call coming in, routing into your mix on a second channel, or maybe even have a third person in studio on the third channel. And it just allows you to control how loud and the volumes of everybody right in the mixer. It does all the mixing, and then it can send it to whatever you choose to record. For me, I kind of like taking an audio recorder, like we talked about earlier, like a Zoom audio recorder, have the audio route into the Zoom and record from there. Some people also can record their audio straight in a software program like Audacity, Audition, something like that. And there's pros and cons to all this stuff. Software maybe can crash, especially if you're running Skype and audio recording and stuff like that. Maybe a lot of people have issues with their computer crashing, but then some people might forget to put batteries in their audio recorder, or like we
Yeah.
had a little issue earlier, the SD card's becoming full all of a sudden. You forgot to, you know what I mean? Something like that. So,
But that's Nathan, if you're have a computer crash, you're going to lose your Skype connection anyways. So it's you're it's the software issue of your software crashing. I think it's pretty few and far between as far as that goes.
yeah, but the nice thing with the backup is you at least have most of that interview
That's
recorded,
right.
especially if you, like you said, you had a superstar, you know what I mean?
You land that
Yeah,
big fish and you have them
exactly. I
shoot
mean,
you.
you never know. And there's other options. I mean, you could plug in and jump back on and continue the Skype call on your phone or something. But
That's right. That's right.
basically that's kind of a more of a complex setup. That's going to be, you know, audio sources going into the mixer, and then the mixer is going to interface with the computer and an audio recorder. Um, it's like you said, it seems complex, but at the end of the day, you're really going to tweak these knobs, especially your microphone knobs. You'll probably set them once and never change them again.
That's right.
The only knobs you might tweak is whenever you have a guest on, you might adjust their levels a little bit. So going on, that's kind of like the studio setup. If you're going to stay at home, do your podcast from there type thing, or you have a stationary place you want to do your podcast. Let's say you want to do something a little bit different though. You want to take your podcast on the go. Maybe your podcast is being recorded during walks in the park, walks along the beach. There's going to be probably a lot of wind in that, so there could be issues. But once again, going back to the fact that all we're doing is just recording audio. So when you think of it like that, there's a lot of options we have here. Your smartphone is a pretty good device for recording audio. Now, it's not going to have a lot of the features and sound quality that an audio recorder, a standalone one, has, but your smartphone, plugged in maybe with the little headphones that it comes in with the microphone built into the earbuds, those can sound pretty good if you're in a place that doesn't have a lot of wind and different audio noises that can see, because it's going to pick up everything around you. And then the standalone audio recorder, like the Zooms, they're going to have all kinds of options for adjusting gain and whatnot. And the microphones that come on those Zooms, even the built-in, the ones on the top, those sound really, really good. I mean, the audio is so crystal clear.
It really is amazing.
And you can record WAV files and adjust, 16 to 24 bit, or, there's all kinds of options for getting good quality audio. And a lot of them, like the Zoom H5, even have XLR inputs. So you can plug in a really nice microphone. I mean, most of the really nice microphones are all going to be XLR cables, right?
That's right.
So even if you invested in a high end one, you could take that on the go with you. And so those are two, like, just really good options that you could just, these devices, they can fit in a pocket, some of the, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there's a great interview on the Tim Ferriss show where he's interviewing Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's just using his H5 with two XLR, it looked like a Shure 58 microphone.
Yeah.
Arnold's holding one and Tim Ferriss is holding one. And that's all they had for the interview, and it sounds fantastic.
Oh yeah, it can sound really good. I mean, if you're in a little windy area, you can put those the foam things on the microphone, or they call them the dead cats, but it looks like the really furry things you put on the microphones, and you can get some really good audio that way. And there's little benefits to each. Like I said, the audio recorder has a lot more settings for controlling the audio. You can even do some compression and some simple audio adjustments with the Zoom. With the smartphone, the nice thing about it is it has access typically to the internet. So you can actually record something, upload it to Dropbox. You can actually edit audio on your phone, with GarageBand or other software. And you could even use something like BossJock and record something and have all the little intros and outros and upload it straight to Libsyn. So there's some interesting, unique advantages to each of those, and which kind of leads me to my more complex setup here. Actually, did you have anything to touch on those, or you want me to just jump in here?
That's
okay.
Bang on. Yeah, good.
So, and this little setup here is almost exactly kind of what you're talking about, where I have the two dynamic microphones plugged in XLR to like a Zoom H5. Where you could take that a step further if you wanted to, is you could take that Zoom, you turn it into what they call a USB audio interface, and you could plug that into, like, say, an iOS device. It could be your iPhone or even an iPad, right? You plug that in. You have to get like a USB to Lightning adapter. I think they call it a camera connection kit,
Yeah.
You plug that into your iOS device and use a software such as BossJock. Now you get the control of audio that the Zoom provides, and then you can plug that into your iOS device. It acts essentially as a computer, and then you can have all your intros, outros. You could do a full legit podcast on the go. You know what I mean? Imagine, I think one of the examples I was thinking of was if your show that you decided to do was you go to different businesses around your local community and maybe interview the CEO, or maybe you're into financials and you interview the CFO or HR persons, whatever your your thing might be. You can go to those businesses, maybe go in their conference room and have like a a full setup, and then when you leave that conference room, it's all recorded, and you can almost have it uploaded if you wanted to, and just be boom, you know. um, it all goes back to what you want to do with your show, and then kind of figuring out what you need to do to accomplish that. But yeah, I think a mobile setup like this is can be really uh, fascinating and interesting.
Oh, absolutely. For just think of if you're into real estate, you could take this setup and go interview people in the community that where you're trying to sell a house, and you can do a walk through the community. It's mobile, it's easy to carry, and you can interview shop owners, restaurant owners, and different people in the community. It's really the sky's the limit now with this technology, and it's just light and it's mobile. Um, Also, with the smartphone, is there a mic that clips in to like an external mic that sits right on top, almost like the H5 there?
Yeah, actually. So, and that's another option if we, going back to the simple setup, if you wanted to do something, if you wanted to get almost, similar audio as the Zoom, actually Zoom sells a XY. I think that's they call it an XY microphone it's shown in the picture here. It's kind of hard to describe. It looks like the microphones are coming to a point.
Sure.
They actually sell that essentially to plug into a lightning port right on the bottom of, say, an iPhone. And so you can get that really nice microphone for a smartphone. And Zoom even has an app, the Zoom app, that allows you to do some of the adjustments for the recording. So that's like that's even another option.
Oh,
You know what I
wow.
mean?
Okay. Okay.
So you can there's so many little options and variables that you can do. You can get really good audio whether you're in studio or whether you're on the go. It just depends, like I said, on what you want to do. Solo show, co-host, in a car.
Yeah. Well,
um
also, I did a interview in studio with a couple of musicians, and we used the Zoom H, like the H5 there. It was the H4,
yeah.
and we had a couple XLR microphones plugged in, and then we used also you can use the microphones that come with the Zoom to record the acoustic instruments. So
Oh yeah.
so you have there's many inputs, and you can still use the built-in microphones on the Zoom to pick up as well. So it's my favorite tool in my studio by far.
Yeah, I totally agree. If there's one tool that you could use even beyond podcasting, I can go on and on about the Zoom. The Zoom is my personal favorite recorder. Like I said, there's other brands that make recorders, and I'm sure they have some great sound and options as well. One of the things the Zoom, particularly the H5 and the H6 have, are these little capsules on top that are removable, and you could remove them and put different types of microphone. Like you said, you can put the XY microphone. There's two different shotgun microphones you could put on there. There's even a capsule that adds two more XLR inputs. So that means the Zoom H5 can go from two XLR inputs to four, and a Zoom H6, which already has four XLR inputs, can go to six XLR inputs. I mean, you can have six people around a table, all with a little ATR 2100 mic, and you're going to get separate track for each person, and it's going to sound great. So those Zooms, I just love the flexibility of them, and yeah, they're awesome.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, kind of wrapping up here, I definitely glossed over a few things that would be considered hardware. One, and that's talking about cables in particular. There's a few different types of cables you'll need, and it really depends on what you're doing. I mean, it's going to vary for every setup, so it's hard to talk about those at any great length. But you probably heard us talk about some of these, and you may or may not be familiar with some of them. The first one, uh, the 3.5 millimeter or 1/8 inch audio jack. Most people have seen this. It looks just like the little audio jack you plug into your smartphone. You put your headphones in, right? Or any
Sure.
MP3 player. Everyone's seen that one. Well, he also has a little bigger brother. It's called the 1/4 inch, right? So it's about twice the thickness there. And that one's used in a lot more professional audio gear. You'll use that more when you start using mixers and whatnot. And then when you start using some nicer microphones, it's going to have a XLR jacks typically. Um, and those look like they're kind of just big circles with 3 prongs on them. Those are the 3 main audio cables that you're probably ever going to use. And just like I said, it depends on how you're using them.
Yeah. And
And go ahead.
well, also USB cord as well.
Yeah.
If you want to use, you can use the Zoom as a USB mic, and also the ATR 2100, which I think you mentioned earlier, also comes as a USB mic as well as the XLR.
So yeah, anytime you're interfacing any of your audio equipment with a computer or interfacing your audio equipment, a lot of times with like a tablet or iPhone too, it's going to interface usually via USB. Back in the day, they interfaced a lot more with FireWire, but nowadays it's pretty much all USB, I'd say. And so yeah, anytime you're interfacing with that's where the USB cable definitely comes in. And yeah, so like I said, those vary, but they're really not too hard to figure out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, exactly. But I would have to say, from dealing with students just getting into podcasting, the number one hurdle, without a doubt, comes down to this particular segment that we're doing here today is tweaking your gear and hooking up your setup.
Yeah, and it like it really really doesn't have to be too complex. You know that those Zoom recorders, like we talked about over and over, you know, those are magic pieces. And getting a good microphone. Now, real quick, a couple tips on a microphone. Typically, podcasters, they stick to using a dynamic microphone with a cardio pickup pattern, and that's a typical for any vocal use, right? And basically what that does is it's going to pick up the audio coming directly into the mic in front of it, but audio that's like on the sides of the mic, it tries to ignore, right?
Sure.
So it just means that it's not going to pick up as much junk, hopefully, and that's actually really nice for podcasting. So some popular mics, the ATR 2100 we've mentioned over and over and over. I think it's a great mic. It sounds great, and like you said, the option of USB and XLR up front gives you versatility for growing with your podcasting career. But you'll see other popular mics like the Electro Voice RE20. That's used in a lot of radio stations. The Heil PR40 is a popular podcasting mic. A lot of well-known podcasters use.
Yep.
Same exact type of microphone, just more sensors. They're more expensive, a lot more expensive, and I guess to some trained ears, you can probably notice some differences. But so yeah, I think that's definitely those 2 places you want to spend your money. But that's pretty much it. So we kind of covered an in studios kind of setup, some setups on the go, and keep in mind, like, these are just a couple ideas. These can be even more flexible than that, and it's really, like you said, the sky's the limit. And you can tweak this to fit your needs exactly, and that's the fun part.
Yeah, the sky is the limit, and don't let this be a roadblock for you getting into podcasting, because it really isn't too difficult, and the information is out there to get started and get your setup the way you want it, and to launch your podcast. So thanks, Nathan, very much for coming on. Where can we find you on the web?
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for having me. If you have any questions for me, you can contact me on Twitter. I'm at TechGuyNate, and yeah, just hit me up and ask any questions. And thanks for having me again, Scott.
Well, thank you.